And Jesus said, I came only for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Are Jews and Israel synonymous terms in the first century? I'm privileged to discuss this with Paula Fredriksen today. Thank you to those who made this trip possible. I hope everybody enjoys. Dr. Fredriksen, Paula, in the first century, is it fair to say the terms Jews was used synonymously with the term Israelites or Israel? When New Testament authors refer to the house of Israel or the 12 tribes, are they implying the lost northern tribes have somehow been restored? What does Matthew's Jesus mean by the lost sheep of the house of Israel? I think it's interesting. He says, don't go to the way of the don't enter any city of the Samaritans and don't go in the way of the Gentiles. Rather go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. House of Israel? Well, I've heard that word before. Does that mean that means only go to the northern kingdom? Or obviously not. But can you take us through some of these terms and what's going on by the first century?
The northern kingdom disappeared in minus 722. The Assyrians were in the neighborhood. By the time we're dealing with the first century, I mean, that population has gotten blended. Okay. When people say Israel, Paul uses, am I not an Israelite, right? He refers to himself that way. Does that mean that he's a northerner? It means that he's a Jew. And the term Israel has this biblical resonance that the word Judaios doesn't. And so he's just, I think the terms are synonymous. And I think that he distinguishes between ethne and Israel, because he does so explicitly in Romans 11:25 and 26, the fullness of the ethne and all Israel, two separate groups. And at the end of Galatians, it's he calls peace upon the assembly, the Christ assembly, and upon the Israel of God, which is, he's distinguishing those two groups. And he's talking about the Jewish movement, or at least a part of the Jewish movement that agrees with Paul. And although he refers to even his opponent, and upon the
and as for all who walk by this rule, peace and mercy be upon them and upon the Israel of God. So this is a controversial verse, right? But it's like he's trying to say that he's talking about all who walk by this rule are the Christians, the church. Peace and mercy be upon them and upon the Israel of God, as if that's somebody else. I get maybe she's saying, it sounds like she's saying that the Israel of God is Jews who believed. But a lot of people say the so-called replacement theology people, they'll say that the Israel of God is the church. And so he's just saying it's kind of like a parallelism. He says, peace and mercy upon them and upon the Israel of God. It's like he's saying the same thing twice,
Israel of God, which is, he's distinguishing those two groups. And he's talking about the Jewish movement, or at least a part of the Jewish movement that agrees with Paul. And although he refers to even his opponents as Israelites, are they Israelites? So am I, 2 Corinthians 11. So he's using Israel as a synonym for Jew, which is how it would be used. And to the Christ assembly and upon the Israel of God, which is, he's distinguishing those two groups. And he's talking about the Jewish movement, or at least a part of the Jewish movement that agrees with Paul. And although he refers to even his opponents as Israelites, are they Israelites? So am I, 2 Corinthians 11. So he's using Israel as a synonym for Jew, which is how it would be used. And it's because it has biblical panache that that Paul grabs onto it. He's strutting his stuff in the letters and backlighting himself with the whole drama of redemption. That's the way he's recast the Jewish Bible.
When I read Acts 13, I know this isn't Paul, this is whoever the author of Luke Acts is, probably early 2nd century material. I'm convinced. I like Pervo and
whoever the author of Luke Acts is, whoever it could be. Who knows? Who knows? It's Luke. It's Luke. Okay, Luke wrote Luke, and he wrote the book of Acts.
Probably early 2nd century material. I'm convinced. I like
early
Pervo.
2nd century. This guy is trying to say that the book of Luke and the book of Acts are written in the 2nd century. These guys are like the true, the scholars that are really out there. They're real critical, not evangelical scholars. I know, it's absurd, man. Why wouldn't they? You think you know what they say? Because Jesus predicted the destruction of the temple in the Gospels, right? They'll say that it must have been written after the destruction of the temple. It must have been, Meanwhile, the thing is, if the disciples had written that thing after the destruction of the temple, then they would have said that Jesus predicted this, and then it happened. Then they would say, look, he predicted it and it happened. He is really God, But they didn't say that because they didn't want to, because it didn't happen yet. Because the thing is, it's dumb. And also, the thing is, you can't write a book like the Gospels, any of the Gospels. You can't write any of those books without if the temple had been destroyed, and you write one of those books and you don't even mention that the temple's been destroyed, it just doesn't make any sense. It's like me saying like, it's like me writing the history of America without talking about the fact that, you know, there was a revolution or something. I don't know. It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense.
Is probably early 2nd century material. I'm convinced. I like Pervo, and then of course Shelley Matthews. I'm interviewing her soon.
Oh, good.
She's awesome. Want to talk to her about it and get into this. But I read that in Acts 13:16 is the verse, and then 26, where it says, Paul stood up and with his hands motioned and said, "Men of Israel, and you God-fearers, listen, hearken to me," depending on the translation. And then the next one says, "Sons of Abraham's family, and those among you who fear God." Like 2 totally separate groups in Acts. And it's interesting you brought up the all Israel and multitude of nations at the end in Romans 11. I never thought that those were 2 groups. I never came to think of it that way. That this is multitude of nations, ethne, and Israel, 2 separate groups here.
Right, and it's quite specific if you're dealing with biblical tropes, because it's the Table of Nations has 70 people groups, and then Abraham's family hides off of one of those.
Well, I don't know. Be careful, because like when Paul's talking though, he's reading those things from Acts 13 and Acts 16. That's when Paul's preaching to these Jews. And among the Jews, there are these Gentiles who they call them God-fearers. They're like Gentiles who have heard about the God of Israel and they worship him, you know. And they'll what they'll do is they'll go around with the Jews to learn about their religion. And so when Paul was preaching to those Jews there, Acts 13, Acts 16, there were these other people there who were Gentiles, and so he says, "You brothers of Israel, and also you." Among you who fear God, right? That's what he's saying. But when he says that in like Galatians or in Romans, it's a little bit different. Romans 11, she's right. He distinguishes between the Gentiles and Israel. But in Romans 9, that's debatable. Although the dispensations will say, when he says Romans 9, he says, not all Israel, they're not all Israel which are of Israel, right? Neither because they are the seed of Abraham are they all children, but in Isaac shall thy seed be called. Because they which are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of God, but the children of the promise are counted for the seed. So there he seems to be saying that the church is the true children of Abraham, and the flesh children of Abraham, the Jews, are not the true children of God, right? Although dispensationalists will argue that he's just distinguishing between Jewish believers and Jewish unbelievers.
Semitic group, right? So it's conceived of as 2 separate groups. And you know, you have a Samaritan inscription from Delos that describes itself as Israel that gives its first fruits to Mount Gerizim. So the Samaritans are talking about themselves as Israel too. It's a very rubbery term.
Do you think there's a jab in Matthew where we were just bringing up, don't go enter any city of the Samaritans, don't go in the way of the Gentiles, rather go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel? Obviously somebody Jewish or more on the side of Jews would have said this. The story ends with go and make.
On the side of Jews? Is that what this guy's trying to say? No, that's because Jesus was on the side of the Jews.
Obviously somebody Samaritans, don't go in the way of the Gentiles, rather go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Obviously somebody Jewish or more on the side of Jews would have said this. The story ends with go and make disciples of all ethne, right? So it's what he's
probably not. He's not really. They're like believers, you know what I mean? But they don't really believe. It's like when Paul says, you know, there's some that they have this kind of, they put on this look that's spiritual, but they don't really fear God. And this is what he's talking about. I think it's like the one, you know, when he's talking about the anyway, I'll find the scripture.
The story ends with go and make disciples of all ethne, right? So it's what he's doing is doing a 2-stage model of first two Jews, which is quite specifically the people in the Galilee and Judea in Matthew's story, and that's where the Jews are.
I just think
they might call themselves Christians though, but they're not like believers like the way we are. That's what I'm saying. When Paul says, you know, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. Right? That's what Paul says about these people. That's what I think of when I think of these people, these secular Christians, quote unquote. That's what I think of. They have a form of godliness because they'll say they're Christians. They'll go to church. right? But they're liberals, you know. They don't really believe the Bible. They don't believe that God is all powerful and stuff. They don't believe
Judea in Matthew's story, and that's where the Jews are.
I just think that by the fact that he's saying only go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, Samaritans aren't counted in that, according to this author.
The Samaritans think they are.
Right.
The Jews think they're not.
Right.
So
it's
business as usual. You know, the Hasmoneans weren't good to the Samaritans. They didn't like the competition of the temple on Mount Gerizim with the temple in Jerusalem. I mean, it's business as usual. It's identity politics and the type of vocabulary that's used to.
So what she's saying now is the Hasmoneans, right? That's like the people who, like the Herod, like, you know, Herod and his family, they're the Hasmoneans. And I don't know what she's trying to say. Like, okay, I guess they didn't like the Samaritans. Yeah, of course, we know that. But that doesn't mean, I mean, it's not like Jesus was on the side of the Hasmoneans, you know? It's
identity politics and the type of vocabulary that's used to articulate that.
Well put. Okay, let's get into maybe a couple examples here and get your thoughts. Matthew 15, 21 to 26.
Sorry, I'm trying to like figure out what she's
in Jerusalem. I mean, it's business as usual. It's identity politics and the type of vocabulary that's used to articulate that.
Well put.
Identity politics. She thinks it's identity politics. Jesus Christ gave some instructions to his disciples. And she thinks he's playing identity politics. It's so ridiculous.
Let's get into maybe a couple examples here and get your thoughts. Matthew 15, 21 through 26, 10, 5 to 6, where it's that whole, I came only for the lost sheep. And going out from there, Jesus went up to the regions of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a Canaanite woman from the area came and cried and saying, have mercy on me, Lord, son of David. My daughter is badly demon possessed. But he did not answer her a word. Then the disciples came and begged him, send her away, because she keeps on crying out after us. So he answered, saying, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But she came and bowed before him and said, Lord, help me. But he answered, saying, it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. And of course, even the dogs get the crumbs off the table. But I came only for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Do you think that this is, in the words of Jesus, that Jesus came for the Jews first?
I think he only came to the Jews. That was the neighborhood. That was his beat. He goes back and forth according to I think the itinerary in John is more plausible. I'm not saying it's exact and historical, but it's more plausible that Jesus, if he wants to deal with as many Jews as possible, will go up to Jerusalem and teach during the high holidays. So this passage in Matthew, notice what Matthew's doing with his vocabulary. He's changing Mark, where it's a Syro-Phoenician woman, which is exactly what you'd expect in the neighborhood of Tyre, right? And he's backlit it with a biblical story. There are no Canaanites in the first century. But by having her be a Canaanite, he's dragging Hebrew scripture into this story. And Jesus is saying, I'm not supposed to talk to Canaanites. Good grief.
Whatever, man. Like, they're Canaanites. That's what it is, you know? I guess because nobody called them that anymore, right? Because nobody would use that term, Canaanites, in the first century. So that's why she's saying that, right? But that's what they are. Because that's what a Syro-Phoenician is. They live in Canaan, so they're Canaanites, you know? And there's different groups within Canaan that you could refer to as Canaanite. There was never any group that was just the Canaanites. There was never any single tribe that was the Canaanites, right? There was all these different tribes in the land of Canaan who the Bible will refer to them as Canaanites, you know? Like whoever, I don't know, like the Jebusites and the different people like that, you know?
Into this story. And Jesus is saying, I'm not supposed to talk to Canaanites. Good grief. I'm going to Jews. I'm going to Jews.
Great point. Yeah, that's a great point.
Identity politics is more like... Wait, sorry. I'm trying to keep track of a couple of things here. But anyway, the identity politics, it's not so much left-right. It's more like, oh, I'm an Indian man, you're a white man, whatever, that type of thing. That's identity. Or also like the gender politics, those type of things. That's identity politics. So they're trying to say that there was identity politics in the Middle East at that time, which there was kind of, right? But not in the way that she's saying. That there was identity politics, but Jesus doesn't play identity politics. He's playing something else. He's playing a game. He's obeying God's commandment. God's commandment was that he go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Girgashites, yeah, man. Yeah, well, these people think that Jesus was some kind of political figure or some dumb thing like that. Yeah, it's pretty dumb. Yeah. But I think, and this kind of ties in with the theory that I'm trying to figure out here, right? Which is that is Jesus coming back? Is it like most of the Jews are already saved? You know? and he's coming back. That's why he calls them the lost sheep. They are his sheep, but they're lost. Okay, and he goes, it is not good to take the children's bread and give it to dogs, right? So the children, the children of the house of Israel, they are the children, they're the sheep. So it fits into the theory that I have, that I'm not the only one, but it fits into this theory that, okay, these people were, most of the Jews that Jesus is talking to and whatnot, they're saved already. And what he's trying to do is get them to join the church by believing in him, by believing that he is the Messiah. And it's not so much about trying to get them saved, because the whole point of Israel was for them to be believers in God and saved, and then they were going to go out and spread the message of God, and people were going to see, and if they were like living as God wanted them to, he would continually be blessing them. And then all the blessings that they have, people would see that and be like, wow, these people, they're so blessed, they must be really know the true God. And then the people would come and they would kind of join the religion. That's like, for example, when Moses built when Solomon built the temple, the woman, like that woman, the Queen of Sheba, she came and she was so impressed, right? That's the kind of thing that was supposed to be what was the Israel. That's what they were supposed to be as a nation. Okay, but of course they started sinning and they completely failed, and so that's why they didn't do it. And then God would keep like having mercy on them, but they kept messing up. But finally, he sent his son, and they crucified him, right? And this is in one of the parables as well. But anyway, we'll talk about that. Anyway, the point is that's what it is to sending to that lost sheep of the house of Israel. He's supposed to get them back in the fold, and then they can go and become these nation of priests and kings and go out and spread the message to the world, and people get saved. That's why he was there for them.
And Jesus is saying, I'm not supposed to talk to Canaanites. Good grief. I'm going to Jews. I'm going to Jews.
Great point. Yeah, that's a great point to bring up.
What's she talking about?
In the first century. But by having her be a Canaanite, he's dragging Hebrew scripture into this story. And Jesus is saying, I'm not supposed to talk to Canaanites. Good grief. I'm going to Jews. I'm going to Jews.
Great point. Yeah, that's a great point to bring up.
He didn't say I'm not supposed to talk to you. Why did he talk to her? He talked to her. But what he said was, I'm not supposed to give the children's bread to the dogs, because these people, these Canaanites, they're unbelievers. So they don't get the bread, they don't get the miracles, they don't get the things, right? He doesn't heal them. He heals the Jews because they are saved, you know? But that woman, he actually ended up saving her too, because he ended up saying, "Oh woman, you know, thou art great is your faith," or something like that, right? And he says her faith is great as a Gentile, right? But whereas for his disciples, he kept saying, "You have little faith," you know, like when Peter was sinking in the water. Why dost thou doubt, oh ye of little faith, right? So the disciples keep, you know, that's the thing about Matthew. He's showing that the Gentiles are part of the mission, but that the mission was to Israel first, and then out to the Gentiles. Anyway.
I'm going to Jews. I'm going to Jews.
Great point. Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. He goes on, in these the 12, Jesus sent out instructing them, saying, "Do not go in the way of the nation."
You know what, man? That's an interesting question. Like, I don't know. I don't think they can, but maybe they can. It's weird, right? Because we don't really know. We have no way of really knowing 100%. They do seem to have some communication more than we realize. And when that donkey talked to Balaam in Numbers 22 or whatever, it's weird because it's like you just start talking to him. It's almost like, okay, they can't talk because they don't have the facilities to do it. But if they had like a tongue that worked, or a voice box or whatever, maybe they could. I don't know. But probably the God gave that particular donkey some greater intelligence to be able to articulate things, you know, because I don't think they have the intelligence to articulate things like that, you know. I don't know. Jesus told the Pharisees to clean the inside of the cup, which sounds like sanctification. Why would Jesus tell unsaved people to sanctify themselves or clean the inside of the cup? Interesting. I have to think about that.
nations, Gentiles, and to a city of the Samaritans, do not go in.
And then you know what too? Real truth in that chapter, right? When he says, you will not, you neither do you enter, and then you prevent others from entering, right? So people think that means that the Pharisees aren't going to be saved because they won't enter the kingdom, right? But then many people now are saying that Matthew, when he says enter the kingdom, it's like some kind of royal entrance. It's like a reward. So that those Pharisees he's talking to in Matthew 23, they are going to heaven, but they won't get the entrance, you know? And not only are they not going to get the entrance, but they're preventing other people from getting the entrance. You know, maybe that's what he's saying. Anyway, think about that.
In, go instead to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So these would be the Jews.
I think so. And that's the movement launches from Jerusalem. And I think it begins to spread out through the network of synagogue communities. So they go to Israel and the diaspora once they've been to Israel back home. And it's only once they get to the diaspora, and the diaspora demographically, in terms of different people groups and different gods, happens already on the rim of Judea, right? Because the Romans are in Caesarea. Herod built a temple to Augustus in Caesarea, and also two more. I mean,
yeah, because the idea is that the sentence of hell, at least in Matthew, at least the way Matthew's using the word hell, in most cases anyway, I'm not really sure. I haven't systematically gone through all these things, but the idea is that when Matthew says hell, he's not talking about going to actual hell for eternal torment. He's talking about just a punishment, a judgment, either in this life or at the judgment seat of Christ.
The diaspora as a place of non-Jewish settlement is already in Judea.
That's interesting too. Maybe that theory is probably a longer walk. I don't know. That sounds like maybe a stretch, but I don't know. That's possible. Maybe I have to check that out. But that's interesting thought there. Anyway, what you saying about?
And
that?
it's there that different people groups and different gods happens already on the rim of Judea, right? Because the Romans are in Caesarea. Herod built a temple to Augustus in Caesarea, and also two more. I mean, the diaspora as a place of non-Jewish settlement is already in Judea. And it's there that the apostles begin to encounter this both and model of pagans who are hanging around in the synagogue as well.
Wow. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Like Cornelius, right?
That's what
he's built a synagogue.
I'm sorry. I don't understand what's going on here.
For a demographic out through the network of synagogue communities. So they go to
the 12. Okay. Jesus sent out instructing them, saying, do not go in the way of the nations, Gentiles, and to a city of the Samaritans, do not go in. Go instead to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So these would be the Jews.
I think so. And that's the movement launches from Jerusalem. And I think it begins to spread out through the network of synagogue communities. So they go to Israel and the diaspora once they've been to Israel back home. And it's only once they get to the diaspora, and the diaspora demographically, in terms of different people groups and different gods, happens already on the rim of Judea, right? Because the Romans are in Caesarea. Herod built a temple to Augustus in Caesarea, and also two more. I mean, the diaspora as a place of non-Jewish settlement is already in Judea.
What did she just say? Caesarea? What is that? What's Caesarea? Because I think of Caesarea as that. You know how some people will say that the Ashkenazi Jews are descended from the Khazars, you know, which is this place in like Western Asia. I think it's in like modern Persia, modern Iran, you know, I think. I'm not too sure, but it's around there. So, or it's like somewhere like in the Caucasus region, you know, somewhere around there. I don't know. But she's saying like, no, dude, don't go there, bro. That's not what she's talking about, man. But anyway, that's not what Real Truth is saying, bro. But anyway, so she's saying something about Khazaria. What kind of thing is that? Khazaria. What is that? Khazaria. Wait. First century. What is this thing? No. Oh, you don't have anything for that? Jewish research will text DNA evidence. See, this is Khazaria is the name of that kingdom where the Jews are supposedly descended from, the Ashkenazi Jews. Anyway, whatever.
And it's there that in Caesarea, Herod built a temple to Augustus in Caesarea, and also two more. I mean, the diaspora as a place of non-Jewish settlement is already in Judea. And it's there that the apostles begin to encounter this both and model of pagans who are hanging around in the synagogue as well.
Wow. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Like Cornelius, right? If he's built the synagogue, why shouldn't he be hanging around?
Yeah, I don't think they'd have a problem with that at all. But as far as the notion of Israel and its understanding to be Jews synonymously, it's fair to say
model of pagans.
I don't know what they're saying. I'm sorry, you guys. This is
it's
so
already in Judea. And it's there that the apostles begin to encounter this both and model of pagans who are hanging around in the synagogue as well.
Wow. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Like Cornelius, right? If he's built the synagogue, why shouldn't he be hanging around?
Yeah, I don't think they'd have a problem with that at all. But as far as the notion of Israel and its understanding to be Jews synonymously, it's fair to say that this is probably across the board understood. And I just want to get your thoughts. I interviewed Andrew Tobolowsky. He wrote a book on the myth of the 12 tribes of Israel recently. And Judah kind of, according to him and his investigation, Judah kind of puts themselves into the narrative of Israel. In fact, initially, Judah wasn't even, unless you buy the two kingdoms were really united at one point, and they may have been, but maybe for a short period, he said, it might have been short-lived, that they kind of placed themselves into the genealogical narrative.
That's how stories and myths of origins work. You insert yourself into the narrative. I mean, that's what Islam does with biblical religion, Western biblical religions, right? They become descendants of Ishmael.
Right.
So that you insert yourself into the genealogy.
And I just figured that they may have, once all that's gone and the northern kingdom's gone, they capitalize on the narrative of Israel, but also take upon themselves the claim to being called Israel.
Well, I think Israel is the umbrella term. It's a B'nai Israel in the Hebrew Bible.
Right.
And I think that it's really not a stretch to consider that. Now, what does it mean to be a Jew is then again a whole argument. Well, if you do this but you don't do that, are you a good Jew or you're a naughty Jew, but you're still a Jew? So it's when we say Jews, we're not dealing with Jews are no more on the same page.
You want to come up here and talk about that, John? We can have a little debate here. Not formal. I know you don't formally debate, but we could have an informal debate.
In antiquity than they are now. There's tremendous variety of Jewishness. But I think Israel is a capstone word because it's biblically rooted.
Thank you. Thank you to those who contributed in the GoFundMe on making this trip possible for these 12.
What was the point of that? What was the point of what they just said? Why were they even saying that? Okay, Jesus came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Are they trying to say that the Gentile mission was not part of his mission or something? I don't know what they're trying to say. Are these two people willfully ignorant of the fact that strangers joined themselves unto Israel according to the law and they were called proselytes? I'm really confused as to what they're saying. And I think they did, because they were mentioning about Cornelius and stuff. I think they do kind of get that. I'm not sure what I don't know what the point of this video was, but the thing is he had a longer conversation with her and he just cut up parts of it. And so there may not be an actual point to what they just talked about. It's just maybe in the longer conversation, you can get more out of it. I don't know what they're even saying, man. It's weird.
Okay. I'm studying the Bible in Toronto. 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 Studying the Bible with Mike and Pat. These other YouTubers are just so trash. Hit the thumbs up if you want to support. Go follow Mike as he follows the Lord. I'm studying the Bible in Toronto. 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 You better watch out, Mike's calling out the shills. If you're not free grace, you need to sit down and chill. We're not hyper grace, you know we keep it real. Eternally secure, you know that we're sealed. We don't back low, we're not workspace heretics. Mike's not in it for the money, trying to get a lick. They out here selling their souls for a couple clicks. Becoming Freemasons so they can't just get rich. I'm studying the Bible in Toronto. 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 Shout out to Mike and Pat. Check out his channel, Toronto Bible Study. Subscribe and like.